Mente crua. You wake up every day and go through the motions, doing all the things you're supposed to do, saying all the things you're supposed to say, being the person everyone expects you to be. But underneath all that performance, there's this gnawing feeling that you don't actually know who you are, that the person you're presenting to the world is a collection of learned behaviors and survival mechanisms and carefully constructed masks, and the real you, whoever that was, got buried so long ago that you can't remember what they looked like, what they wanted, what they cared about. And people tell you it's just a phase, just a quarter-life crisis, just normal existential anxiety that everyone goes through, but it's not drama, it's not you being overdramatic or too sensitive or too introspective. It's genuine disorientation. It's the psychological equivalent of waking up in a house you've lived in for years and suddenly not recognizing any of the rooms, not knowing how you got there, not understanding why you made any of the choices that led you to this moment. And that disorientation, that fundamental disconnection from yourself, that's not a mood, that's maladjustment. That's what happens when you've been living someone else's version of your life for so long that you forgot you were supposed to have your own. And now you're standing in the wreckage of the identity you never actually chose, wondering who built this person you've become and whether it's too late to tear it down and start over. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back, not physically but spiritually, like you're looking at a stranger who borrowed your face. You make decisions, but they don't feel like yours. They feel like choices you think you should make based on what a person in your position would do. You have opinions, but you're not sure if they are actually yours, or if you just adopted them from people you wanted to impress, to fit in with, to avoid conflict with. You don't know what you actually like anymore, what brings you joy, what you want your life to look like, because every answer you come up with sounds like it came from someone else, from your parents, from society, from the version of success you were sold before you were old enough to question whether you actually wanted it. You go through your days feeling like an actor playing a role, hitting your marks, saying your lines, but never actually being present, never actually feeling anything real, just performing humanity while feeling completely hollow inside. You've tried to figure it out. You've tried journaling, therapy, self-help books, meditation, all the things you're supposed to do when you're lost, and maybe some of it helped temporarily, gave you a moment of clarity, a brief sense of direction. But then you're right back here, right back in the fog, right back to not knowing who you are or what you want or why nothing feels real anymore. And the worst part is you can't explain it to anyone. Can't make them understand that this isn't just sadness or anxiety or depression. This is deeper. This is structural. This is the foundation of your entire sense of self crumbling, and everyone keeps trying to patch the walls when the whole building needs to come down. Here's what actually happened. You spent your entire life adapting, morphing, becoming whatever version of yourself would keep you safe, keep you accepted, keep you from being rejected or abandoned or criticized. And in the process of becoming acceptable, you stopped being authentic. You traded your real self for a version that other people could tolerate, and that trade seemed worth it at the time, seemed necessary, seemed like the only way to survive in a world that punished difference and rewarded conformity. So you learned to read rooms, to adjust your personality, to suppress the parts of yourself that didn't fit, to enhance the parts that got positive responses. And over time, over years, over decades of this constant adaptation, you lost track of what was real and what was performance. You forgot which parts were you and which parts were just survival strategies. And now you're stuck with a personality that's functional but hollow, effective but empty, successful by external measures but completely disconnected from anything that feels true. And the identity crisis you're having isn't because you're dramatic, it's because your system is finally rejecting the transplant. Your authentic self is finally screaming loud enough that you can't ignore it anymore. Finally demanding to know why you buried it, why you chose everyone else's comfort over your own existence, why you've been living a life that looks good on paper, but feels dead on the inside. The brutal truth is this. You can't fix an identity crisis by trying to figure out who you are, because asking "who am I?" when you're in this state is like asking someone with amnesia to remember their childhood. The access point is broken. The connection is severed, and you're not going to think your way back to yourself. You're not going to logic your way into authenticity. You have to stop trying to figure it out and start feeling your way back. Start paying attention to what makes you feel alive versus what makes you feel dead. What pulls you forward versus what you do out of obligation. What lights something up inside you versus what you do because you think you should. And that requires you to get quiet, to stop consuming everyone else's opinions about who you should be, to stop comparing your path to anyone else's, to stop trying to build an identity that makes sense to other people, and start excavating the one that's been buried under years of performance and adaptation and survival. And that excavation is painful. It's disorienting. It requires you to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, of not having answers, of not being able to tell people what you're about or where you're going, because right now you don't know, and that not knowing is exactly where you need to be. That's the fertile void. That's the space where the real you can finally emerge if you can resist the urge to fill it with another performance, another role, another version of yourself that's designed to please others instead of express truth. So here's what you do when you're in the middle of an identity crisis, when you don't know who you are and everything feels fake and you're desperate for something real. You stop trying to build a new identity and start stripping away the false ones. You start saying no to things that don't resonate. Even if you can't explain why, you start pulling back from relationships and activities and commitments that feel like obligation rather than choice. You start creating space, lots of space, empty space, uncomfortable space where you're not performing for anyone, not producing anything, not being useful or impressive or acceptable, just existing, just being, just sitting with yourself in silence and seeing what comes up, what wants to be expressed, what's been suppressed, and you let it be messy, you let it be contradictory, you let it not make sense. Because sense comes later, coherence comes later right now. You just need truth. You need raw, unfiltered, authentic expression, even if it's ugly, even if it's selfish, even if it's not the kind of person you thought you were supposed to be, because that's the point. You're not supposed to be anything, you're supposed to discover what you are, and discovery requires exploration, requires permission to try on different versions, requires the courage to be inconsistent, to change your mind, to admit you were wrong about who you thought you were. And every time you do this, every time you choose authenticity over acceptance, presence over performance, truth over comfort, you're building back your real identity, not the one you thought you should have, but the one that's actually yours, the one that feels real even when it doesn't make sense, the one that might not fit anyone's expectations, but at least it fits you, and that fit that alignment between who you are internally and who you're being externally. That's what you've been missing. That's what the crisis is about. Not drama, not phase, but genuine misalignment, deep maladjustment between your authentic self and your performed self, and closing that gap, bringing those two versions into coherence. That's the work, that's the only work that matters, and it starts with admitting that you don't know who you are, and that's okay. Not knowing is the beginning, confusion is the portal, crisis is the catalyst, and on the other side of it, if you're brave enough to go through instead of around, if you're willing to sit in the discomfort of not having an identity, instead of rushing to construct another false one, you'll find something real, something solid, something that doesn't need external validation because it's internally true. And that truth, that alignment, that's what you've been searching for in all the wrong places. Thinking it was out there somewhere in a career, in a relationship, in an achievement, when really it was always in here, buried under years of adaptation and performance and trying to be what everyone else needed. And now you get to dig it up, now you get to meet yourself for real, maybe for the first time. And that meeting, that recognition, that's not drama, that's homecoming. That's the end of the maladjustment and the beginning of actually living as yourself instead of as the person you thought you had to be to survive. And survival's over, you made it, now you get to actually live. But first you have to find out who's doing the living, and that means going through the crisis, not around it, because the crisis isn't the problem. The crisis is your system finally telling you that something fundamental needs to change. And the only thing worse than going through it would be ignoring it. Staying adjusted to the wrong life, staying aligned with the false self, staying in maladjustment because at least it's familiar, at least it's safe, at least you know how to perform it. But you can't perform forever. Eventually the real you will break through. Eventually the crisis will come. And when it does, when you're standing in the ruins of the identity you built, remember this: you're not broken, you're breaking open. You're not losing yourself, you're finding yourself, and that finding, that brutal, honest excavation of who you actually are beneath all the layers of who you thought you should be. That's not drama, that's the most real thing you'll ever do.